So you want to make custom activities for Crusader Kings version 1.16 or more. So first things first, what you want to do is go to your mod library and then click on upload mod, and then create a mod and name it whatever you like. My mod is going to be called test activity, and then version 0.1, and then test activity, same name as the name above and the directory, and then we're going to have a tag. So I'm going to put it as gameplay tags, and then create mod. Then going back into the playsets, we can go add to current playset, and you see how mod is here. We're going to go show in folder. So this would otherwise be found in Documents, Paradise Interactive, Crusader Kings III mod and test activity, or your mod name. We're going to create some folders now. So we're going to go new folder, then going to create common and localization. So new folder localization. Then inside of common, we want to go and create a new folder called activities. And then inside of activities, we're going to create a new folder and call it activity underscore types. And we want to go back to the base of our mod. And then inside of localization, we want to create a new folder, call it English. And then inside of English, we want to create a new folder again and call it activities. And then another folder alongside that one and call it event underscore localization. And then going back into the base of the mod, we're going to create a new folder and call it events. And inside of that one, we're going to make a new one and call it activities. Inside of that folder, we're going to make a new folder and call it whatever you like. My one is going to be test underscore activity. So this is the name of my modded activity. And then after that, we want to go back to the base of the mod and then go back into common activities, activities types, and make a new text document. We're going to call it test activity.txt. And then open that using Visual Studio Code. All right, so the first things first, we're going to go and click on UTF-8 down in the bottom right here, and then click on Save with Encoding and change that to Save with Encoding UTF-8 with bomb. Then we're going to start typing. So activity test underscore test is going to be the name of my activity, and we're going to go curly brackets and then is underscore shown equals curly brackets and then highest underscore held underscore title underscore tier greater than tier underscore barony. So as long as your highest held title is more than a barony, you can see this activity. And then is underscore playable underscore character equals yes. So if your character is playable, then trigger if, so trigger underscore if equals curly brackets, and then put the limit in equals curly brackets, and then is underscore AI equals yes, but this is just for the AI here. Is underscore at underscore war equals no, and then AI underscore should underscore focus on underscore building in their capital equals no. So if your AI focuses typically on building in their capital, then we don't want them to be doing activities. We want them to be building. And also AI underscore has underscore conqueror underscore personality equals no. And then outside of the second curly brackets, we can move on now to can underscore start underscore showing underscore failures underscore only equals curly brackets. And so within this section of code here, you could do has underscore perk, or so for example, there's a perk within the hiking perk tree called roaming perk. So you could have any sort of perk within the game be a limitation as to whether or not you can do this activity, or you could do age is greater than or equal to 16, for example. So if you want an age limit on this as well, you could do that. I'm just going to have it as is available equals yes, so it is always available. And then outside of that, we can move on to is underscore valid equals curly brackets, and then scope colon host equals curly brackets is underscore imprisoned equals no. We don't want your character to be able to do this activity while they're in prison. And then after that, we can go is underscore landed underscore or underscore landless underscore administrative equals yes. So if your character is either administrative or landless, then you can use this activity. And then not equals curly brackets and then is underscore incapable equals yes. So if your character is incapable, you cannot do this activity. And then outside of that, we can move on to on underscore invalidated equals curly brackets, and if equals curly brackets limit equals scope colon host equals. So if your character is imprisoned, that equals yes, then every underscore attending character equals, no, not equals yes, equals curly brackets, limit equals curly brackets, not equals curly brackets, and then within this equals scope colon host. If the host is imprisoned and you aren't also the host, then trigger the event. So trigger underscore event equals activity test.0022. So with the events that I'm writing out here, I will show you how to make some of them later on in the video, but for the most part, I recommend going back and looking at the event video that I made previously, and it will give you more information and allow you to make more different events and also link one to another. Moving on from that, we can go outside of attending characters and go scope, colon host, equals curly brackets, then trigger event equals activity test, or activity test dot 0021. So this is a different event from what the guests see, but you'll have to create a new event whenever this number is different. And then outside of the scope host and also outside of the if statement, we can create another if. So if equals curly brackets, limit equals curly brackets, scope colon host equals curly brackets, and inside of this we're going to go is landed or landless administrative equals no. And then outside of the limit we can go scope colon activity equals curly brackets activity underscore type equals curly brackets save underscore scope underscore as equals activity underscore type. And then below that we're going to go every attending character equals curly brackets trigger underscore event equals activity underscore system dot 0320. So this is an event that you won't have to create a new one for. This is a predetermined event that has already been made in the base game. All right, and then outside of that if statement, we're going to create another if statement. So if equals curly brackets, limit equals curly brackets, scope colon host equals curly brackets, and then is incapable equals yes. So if your character is incapable, then the scope colon activity equals curly brackets activity underscore type equals save scope as equals activity type. And then underneath that we can go scope colon host equals curly brackets trigger event, so equals activity system dot 0330. So this is a different event from this one, but is similar in the sense that we don't have to make another one. And then we also need to trigger an event for every attending character. So every attending character equals curly brackets limit equals curly brackets, and then within that not equals curly brackets this equals scope underscore host. So as long as you are not the host, then trigger event equals activity system dot 0331. Then outside of that if statement, we're going to create another one, call it if equals curly brackets, add a limit in there. So if limit equals has underscore attending activity guests equals no. So if no one shows up to your event, then the host will get a event. If no one attends your activity, then the host will get this event here. So trigger event equals activity test.0020. So this is a custom event here, so we'll have to create another one for that. So far we've got activity test 0022, 0021, and 0020. All right, so moving on from that, we go to is underscore location underscore valid equals curly brackets. And then inside of this, we're going to write exists equals province underscore owner, and then province underscore owner dot top underscore liege equals scope colon host dot top underscore liege. That's what we're going to need for there. And then we're going to go for on underscore host underscore death equals colon every attending character equals curly brackets, and then trigger event. So upon the host or you dying, if you're hosting it, a specific event, so .0020, for example. So that's the same event as we got up here. This one specifically has no attending guests, but I'm just going to use the same one for the on-host death here. And after the on-host death, we want to go below that and write in province underscore filter equals capital, and AI underscore province underscore filter equals capital. So what these do is filter out whether or not you can, or which barony slash realm or wherever you would want to host this activity. It's defining where you can. You could, for example, write in realm, but there are a few other options as well. But I'm going to go with capital. And then after that, we're going to write in our max underscore province underscore icons. It doesn't matter for me as there will only be one icon as it's just in the capital. But if you're doing something else, you could write in 5, for example, but I'm just going to go with 1. And then under there, we're going to write in the cost of the event. So cost equals curly brackets, gold equals curly brackets, and add. So we're going to add a value to that. Value equals, and then I'm going to use the hunt activity prices. So activity underscore base underscore cost. And then the description of that cost is hunt underscore base underscore cost. And then below this add, we're going to add some more. So add equals curly brackets, value equals, and then hunt activity base cost again. And then we're going to multiply it. So activity underscore cost underscore scale by error. So what that does is it'll multiply based on what, if you're an early medieval, mid-medieval, late medieval, or tribal, for example. So it'll scale the price based on that, and we want to subtract the base cost from that. So the original value being this, multiply it, and then subtract the original value. So it ends up essentially looking like x times y minus x, if that makes sense. I misspelled subtract here. So subtract spelling with the T involved, and then description of that. So we're going to go activity underscore cost underscore scale underscore by underscore error underscore DSC. And then after this, you could, if you want to, write in something that would be essentially like a credit system. So if you have an event previously or an activity that your character has won at, you could have a free activity. So for example, if equals curly brackets, limit equals curly brackets, has underscore variable equals, and then your event token or credit. So what this would do is if you have a variable that you've given your character in a previous event or activity, then you would multiply it by 0 or subtract by 1, depending on how many you're willing to give out. I'm not going to be adding that this time, but if you want to see how it's done, then I could have a future tutorial showing you. All right, then after the cost here, we're going to go into UI underscore predicted underscore cost. So that will go in here. So gold equals curly brackets, and then value equals hunt base cost, and then multiply that by the hunt underscore, no, sorry, activity underscore cost underscore scale by error, and then subtract that. So equals the hunt activity based cost. So that's essentially making it, so what we need to do now is make it into a multiple of 5. So divide equals 5, and then ceiling, so round it up essentially. Ceiling equals yes, and then multiply that by 5. So that is making a multiple of 5 of what this would normally cost, plus the scale of error. And then after the predicted cost there, we're going to go with cooldown. So cooldown, you can go with months, days, or years. I'm going to go with months equals 8, and wait time, wait underscore time underscore before underscore start equals, and then going to have it as days equals 7, so a full week, and then max underscore guest, misspell there, guest arrival delay time. How long will you wait for a guest to arrive if they've been delayed? That I will put it as months equals 5, so 5 months wait time. And then we can start with our phases. So phases equals curly brackets. We're going to start with the first phase in here. So first underscore phase. It could be a different name. This is simply a variable that you would be able to define in your localization. But to make it easy, I'm just using first phase. So inside of here, we're going to go with order equals 1. So this is the first in the activity that will show up. is underscore predefined equals yes, and then is underscore shown. So you could have a predetermined value set here, like if someone has done something in the past, you could say whether or not it is shown or not. I'm just going to be leaving it empty, and then on underscore phase underscore active equals, and then if equals curly brackets limit equals curly brackets, and then this equals scope colon host, and then below that scope colon activity equals curly brackets progress underscore activity underscore phase underscore after, and then equals, and then within there we're going to go weeks equals 2. So progress this specific phase after 2 weeks to phase 2, but we'll get to that. And then within the if statement, we're going to add another line in here, another if statement within this if statement. So if equals curly brackets, then limit equals curly brackets, and then scope colon activity equals curly brackets. Any underscore attending underscore character equals curly brackets, and count equals 0. So if you do not have any attending guests at this activity, then so for example, I'm running not this equals scope colon host. If you don't have any attending characters except for yourself, then what we want to do is go below the limit brackets and then trigger an event. So equals activity test 0.0020. So this is the same as if we had just died or if no one has arrived. And then below this if statement, we're going to go an else statement. So else equals curly brackets and then trigger event equals activity test dot 1001. So this is a new event that we're going to have to be creating later on. And then after the on phase active, we're going to go with on underscore weekly underscore pulse. So every week we want to have something happen. For this example, I'm going to have an if statement. So if equals limit equals curly brackets, this equals scope colon host. If you're the host every week, then we're going to trigger an event. I'm just going to have it called activity test dot 1010. But if you are not the host, so else underscore if equals curly brackets limit equals curly brackets, and not equals curly brackets this equals scope colon host. So if you are not the host, we want to trigger a different event. So trigger underscore event equals activity test dot 1011. And that is the end of this test first phase. So I'm just going to, these are just for examples. You could make this a lot bigger if you want to. I'm just making it as simple as possible to make it into tutorial form. But below the first phase here, we're going to move on to the second phase. So second underscore phase equals curly brackets order equals 2, and then is underscore predefined equals yes, and then below that on underscore enter underscore phase equals curly brackets if equals curly brackets limit equals curly brackets this equals scope colon host. And after the if statement, we want to jump straight into the second phase, so no passive state for this activity. So we're going to go scope colon activity equals curly brackets, and then progress after phase progress activity at phase after, and then we have to put a days or weeks or a month even. So we're going to go with days equals 1. So 1 day will pass and then it'll enter the second phase. And after the on enter phase, we're going to go with on phase active. On underscore phase underscore active equals curly brackets, and if equals curly brackets, limit equals curly brackets, and then this equals scope colon host. And then below the if statement, we're going to go scope colon activity equals, and then progress activity phase after equals curly brackets weeks equals 1. So that is how long this activity phase will last. And then we're going to write another if statement below this one. So if equals limit equals this equals scope colon host. And then we're going to trigger an event below that. So activity test dot 1012, Just realized as recording this, I don't actually need this if statement. I can put this below this limit here and then delete this one here because the second if statement is not useful. But what we can do now is go else underscore if equals curly brackets, then limit equals curly brackets, and then not equals curly brackets. This equals scope colon host. So if you are not the host, then trigger this event. So equals activity test dot 113 or 1013. And then after the onv is active, we're going to write an on underscore end equals and then trigger underscore event equals activity test dot 9001. So I'm mainly using these events as ways to debug here. This on end is pretty uncommon to see in the base game, but you could really do anything. Like on the end here, you could give a trait or XP to a trait or anything like that. I'm just going to just trigger an event here to know that I've ended this phase. And then outside of the phases, we're going to go with allow underscore 0 underscore guest underscore invites. We'll put it as yes. So that essentially means that you can still host this activity even if no one is going to show up. And then we're going with AI underscore will underscore do equals, and then we're going to put in a bunch of different values here. These ones are mainly as examples, but they're different ways of what you could do within this. So value equals 10, so that's a base value. If equals curly brackets, limit equals curly brackets. If you have the trait, for example, lazy, we'll make it have a negative 15 value. So add equals minus 15. So that'll be a net minus 5 value as a base. After that, we could do if equals curly brackets, limit equals curly brackets, then domicile dot provisions or less than or equal to 100. We're going to disincentivize or incentivize against AI having this activity if they have very little provision. So add equals minus 75. So this is very unlikely for the AI to actually do this. And then we're going to work on the plague mechanic. So if you have the Legends of the Dead DLC, you could add this to your code. So if equals curly brackets, limit equals curly brackets, any underscore held underscore title equals curly brackets, tier equals tier underscore county, any underscore county underscore province equals curly brackets, any underscore province underscore epidemic equals curly brackets, and then count greater than or equal to 1. And then we're going to make sure that it is at least a strong outbreak. So we want to limit if AI can have this activity active if it is an apocalyptic outbreak. So outbreak underscore intensity equals, less than apocalyptic. And then outside of the any held title, we're going to go with would underscore follow underscore social underscore distancing underscore value. And then we go greater than or equal to -1. And then outside of the limit brackets, we're going to go add equals curly brackets value equals -60. And then put a description in here. We do not need to put this in localization. We'll just type it out here. So plague in domain. So if there is a plague in your domain, it will be a lot less likely for AI to host this. And then outside of this if statement, we're going to go with an else if. So else underscore if equals curly brackets, then limit equals curly brackets, any underscore realm underscore county equals curly brackets, any underscore county underscore province equals curly brackets, any underscore province epidemic equals curly brackets, count is greater than or equal to 1, and then put as the outbreak intensity is greater than apocalyptic. And then outside the any realm county brackets, we're going to go with would follows social distancing value as -1 again, or greater than or equal to -1. And then outside the limit, we're going to add equals curly brackets value equals -20. So it's disincentivized, but it's not as major as the plague and domain. So this DSC equals, and then plague in top realm. And then outside of the else if statement, we're going to add another if statement. So if equals limit equals curly brackets any underscore held underscore title equals curly brackets, and then tier equals tier underscore county, and then any underscore county province equals curly brackets any province epidemic equals curly brackets, and then count is greater than or equal to 1, and then outbreak intensity equals apocalyptic. And we want to, outside of the limit, we want to add equals curly brackets value equals minus 200. And then description is apocalyptic plague in domain. Can't type today. So that is if the plague is apocalyptic in your realm, then it makes it a lot less likely for the AI to go about this activity. And then we're going to add in an else if statement as well. Again, else if equals curly brackets limit equals curly brackets, and any misspelled that, any underscore held title equals curly brackets tier underscore tier equals tier underscore county, and then any underscore county province equals curly brackets, and then any underscore province epidemic equals curly brackets. Count is greater than or equal to 1, and outbreak intensity is equaling apocalyptic. Then we want to go outside the limit again, so add equals curly brackets, value equals minus 40, misspelled value there, and then description equals apocalyptic plague in top realm. So there is a difference between domain and top realm. Domain is what you own, and top realm is what everyone is within. And then we'll check. Well, we have an AI check interval. So AI underscore check underscore interval equals 60. And then AI underscore will underscore select underscore province equals curly brackets value equals 10. All right, so after that, we want to go and below this, write in guest underscore invite underscore rules equals curly brackets, and then write in rules, curly brackets, 2 equals activity underscore invite underscore rule. And we're going to copy this, so copy that, and then underscore rivals after that. And then below that, we're going to write 3 equals, and then control V for pasting, and then underscore extended underscore family, and then 4 equals copy paste underscore gifts, and then we want to go down a bit more, and then 6 equals activity invite underscore MP. And then outside of the rules here, we're going to go with defaults equals curly brackets, and then 3 equals, and then copy paste underscore liege, and 3 equals copy paste underscore suzerain. And we're just going to copy paste the 3 equals involved in that as well, so we can copy paste that below, and then underscore tributaries, and then again underscore vassals, and then again for confederates, and then again for close family, and then again for friends. We're going to keep doing this for quite a while. I have actually misdone this, so this is a 1, and this is also a 1. And then we're going to copy paste again, replace that with a 1, and then underscore potential underscore friends. And then we're going to go on to that, and then copy paste again, replace this with a 2, and then underscore lovers. And then copy paste again, replace with a 2, underscore potential underscore lovers. And then copy paste again, replace that again with a 2, and then underscore glory underscore hounds, and then copy paste again, but replace with a 1 this time. And we go with hunters. So this is if you are hosting an activity that is similar to a hunt, or if you're making a new one that is similar to a hunt, I mean. And then again, but we don't replace it this time, underscore knights, and then copy paste again, but replace it with a 4 this time, underscore courtiers, and then copy paste again and then replace it with a 4, and this will be for fellow vassals. Copy paste, and then 1 underscore landless adventurers underscore restricted underscore range. All right, so this is the guest invite rules done. We can go out of that and do max underscore guest below that equals 20. So you can change this number to whatever you like. I'm just going to leave it as 20. Host underscore intense is next, so equals curly brackets, and then you need to put a default equals, and then reduce underscore stress intent. So that's the default for the, if you're the host, the default will be reduce stress intent, but you could do intense equals, and then inside of here you could put anything you'd like in terms of what intentions you want your host to have. So you could, for example, have murder attendee intent. I'm just going to leave it as the 2 here, but there are a few other options I will show on the screen now. And then below the host intents, we need to have the guest underscore intents equals curly brackets, and then default again equals reduce stress intent, and then intents equals curly brackets, and then inside of that we're going to have the same thing as above. And then outside of the guest intents, we're going to go to can underscore b underscore activity underscore guest equals curly brackets. And we're going to have is underscore AI equals yes. Is underscore healthy equals yes. And is underscore landed equals no. And then you could have a age requirement here. I'm going to put it as greater than or equal to 6. But you could change this to whatever you like or just not include it at all. All right, and then below that we got or equals curly brackets, and then is underscore night underscore of equals scope colon host. I'm going to be copy pasting the equal sign and beyond, and then we're going to write is underscore counselor underscore of, and then copy paste there, and is underscore child underscore of, copy paste, and then is underscore heir underscore of, copy paste. Is underscore spouse of, and then copy paste, and then the consort, and then copy paste, and then has relation ward, copy paste, and then has underscore relation underscore friend, copy paste, and then has underscore relation underscore lover, copy paste. So that is the can be activity guests. You could expand upon this and add more to it, but I'm just going to be leaving it as this for this tutorial to keep it kind of simple. And then below here, we're going to go in guest underscore join underscore chance. So this is the chance for your guest to join your activity. I'm going to have the base equals 40, and then the base underscore activity underscore modifier equals yes. So this is a predetermined value within the base game files. It just adds to the base game, the base value rather. And then below the guest join chance, we're going to have pulse underscore actions equals curly brackets. We're going to have entries equals curly brackets, and then guest underscore friendship, and then guest underscore insulted. So I'm just putting a space in between these as the code already knows that these are separate values. And then spouse underscore skill underscore diplomacy underscore improves. So these are all different actions that could happen within your activities. So your guest could gain friendship or feel insulted, or your spouse could gain diplomacy skills. There's a whole bunch of different things on the base game wiki. I'm just going to give some examples. So we've got also the spouse underscore gives underscore host underscore prestige. And then below that, we're going to have host underscore gains underscore diplo underscore XP, and host gains steward XP, and then host underscore gains underscore intrigue underscore XP. So these are a bunch of different options here. And then a chance for these events to happen. So chance underscore of underscore no event to happen. we'll have it as, so the lower the number, the higher the chance of an event happening. So I might leave it at 2%. And then below the pulse actions, what we want to do is actually open the base game file. So I'm inside of common activities, activity types, and then playdate.txt. There's also a bunch of other things like in feast.txt, you could get a bunch of backgrounds from in here. I'm just going to be copy pasting a bunch of the backgrounds because I will not be doing any of the art today. So if we just copy paste all of these backgrounds down here, and then copy there, and then paste that below the pulse sections, and scroll to the top, make sure the formatting is correct. It does seem to be. All right, so we're done with the backgrounds. If we scroll back down to the bottom of our txt file here, and then back open the playdate.txt, we want to also copy the window characters here. So all of these all the way down to the bottom, except for, so including the on enter active state. You could also include the on_start here if you are using the free credits, but you would need to change the variable to whatever variable you used. So going back into our txt, we can go below backgrounds and then copy paste there. We want to go through and remove some of the childlike animations. So this here, clutching doll, is not an animation we want our adult characters to be doing. And there's also the child hobby horse, and also the clutching ball and the second guest. And that is our test activity done. All right, so now what we want to do is go and make a new txt file inside of the events test activity. So we want to go new file here, test_events.txt. And then within that txt file, we can start typing here. So we're going to go namespace equals activity test, and then below that we're going to start writing our events out that we've listed in our previous file. So all of these ones here, so activity test 0020, etc. So we're going to start with that activity. So activity test.0020 equals curly brackets. So this event is if the host dies. So we're going to go type equals character event, and then title equals activity test.0020.t, so T for title, and then description or DESC equals activity test.0020.DESC, and then the theme of the event being feast_activity, and then override an icon. And then we'll put the reference as a reference from the base game file. So the one that I'll be specifically using is in quotations gfx/interface/icon/event types/type_illness.dds. So just copy that one over, and then left_portrait equals curly brackets, and then character equals scope : host, and then animation, we'll just put it as idle. And then below the left portrait, we're going to go with an option. We're just going to have one option for this activity. We're going to have the name as activity test.0020.a, so option A. And that's this event done here. So then we can move on and do the next event. So activity test.0021 equals curly brackets, and then type equals character event, and then title equals activity test.0021.t, and then the descriptions are DESC equals activity test.0021.DESC, and then the theme for this activity or event, sorry, we're going to put it as a feast activity, and then we're going to do override icon, and then put the same as before, so copy paste that over. But we're going to change the type_illness to type_prison.dds, and then the left portrait being inside curly brackets, character equals scope : host, and then animation we're going to have as prison dungeon. So this is the event that will play if your character is in prison or the host is in prison. And we're going to have as immediate, and then hosted_successful_interrupted effect. So hosted successful feast interrupted effect equals yes. Then we'll put the option as just one option again. We'll go name equals activity test.0021.a, and then we'll go below this here, We're going to make the next event and call it activity test.0022 equals curly brackets. And then within that event, it's also going to be the same type, so character event, title, and then we're going to have it as activity test.0021. So the same as before, .t, same as before, just so we don't have to write out needless events. So this is for if the host is imprisoned. And then this one will be for the guess if host is imprisoned. So we don't need to have a different title for this one. We're going to use the same one. So description equals activity test.0022. We'll have a different description for this one, as it's not from the host side, it's from the guest side. So we'll need a different description, and we'll put a theme in there, and we'll put the same thing. So feast activity, and then override icon, and we'll put the same icon as before, so the type underscore prison.tds, and then below override icon we can do left portrait, and then inside of curly brackets we can go character, and then scope colon host, and then animation, and prison dungeon. Then we'll put the option as name equals activity test .0022.a. This is that event done. So we're going to go below there, and we'll move on to a different type of activity. So activity test.1001 equals curly brackets, and this one will be a letter event. So letter underscore event, then opening, and then we'll put the description as a already described base game description. So 1501.opening. So this has already been described in the feast.txt or the events within the feast. And below that, we're going to have the description for the actual event. So we're going to have activity test.1001.dsc. So this is the description for this event. And we're going to have the sender. So since it's a letter event, we're going to have a sender. And also, so the sender is going to be scope colon activity dot activity underscore host. And we'll have the immediate as the scope colon not host. Scope colon activity dot activity underscore host equals curly brackets, and then within there we're going to go save underscore scope underscore as underscore sender. Oh no, we're going to put an equal sign in there, not an underscore. Outside of that, we're going to go scope colon activity dot activity underscore location equals curly brackets, and we're going to have it as barony equals curly brackets save underscore scope underscore as barony. And then outside of this last thing we wrote, we're going to write set underscore variable equals curly brackets, and we're going to go name equals is underscore handling underscore feast invitation, and then value equals scope colon sender, and then days equals 20. So this is the immediate done. We're going to go outside of the immediate, then go on underscore trigger fail. So that's if the invitation was failed because it was blocked because an invitation was already being handled. So if equals curly brackets, limit equals curly brackets, and then is underscore available for activity. So available underscore for activity trigger equals yes, and then under there exists equals variable or var colon is underscore handling feast invitation. So you would change this up based on what kind of event you're hosting, but for this tutorial I'm just going to be using the feast invitation stuff. And then below that we're going to go with trigger event equals curly brackets, and then id equals activity test.1001, and then days equals 1. So this is a fallback. If someone is already handling an invitation, we want to give them a day and then trigger it again. And then below the on trigger fail, we're going to give an option and then name that equals activity test.1001.a. And then below that trigger equals curly brackets and then opinion. And then the target for this opinion will be the liege. And then the value is greater than or equal to 0. So if your opinion of your liege is greater than or equal to 0, we want to be able to use this option. And then below the trigger, we're going to go with play underscore music cue. and then mx underscore q underscore banquet. So this is a default music that plays throughout feasts. You could have a look through the base game files to find any other musics, but I found that this is used very often. And then below that, we're going to go with accept underscore activity underscore invite equals scope colon activity. And then we're going to go with set underscore variable equals curly brackets, and then name that variable, so booked for a party, and then value equals scope colon sender, and then days equals 20. And then below the set variable, we're going to have a stress impact. So this is where you could add a whole bunch of different traits and such into here to impact whether or not someone would feel more stressed upon accepting the invite or not. So we're going to have it as an example. We're going to have gregarious equals minor underscore stress loss. So if you are gregarious, you'll have a minor stress loss when accepting this activity. And then AI underscore chance, and then we'll have a base of 90, and then below that opinion modifier, and then opinion underscore target equals scope colon sender. And then below this option, we're going to have a option B for this one. So option equals name equals activity test dot 1001 dot B, and then trigger as well. If your opinion equals curly brackets, that's not curly brackets, equals curly brackets, target equals liege. If it's greater, or sorry, if it's less than 0, then this option will not show up. We'll have the same music, so play music q mx underscore q banquet, and then decline. So this option is declining the invite. So decline underscore activity underscore invite equals scope colon activity, and then remove the curly brackets again. And then stress impact for that we'll have as lazy minor underscore stress gain, and then we'll have gregarious. Oh, sorry, this one is a minor stress loss. It's lazy people don't want to go to activities. So then the gregarious will have a minor stress gain instead. And then reclusive is another example of a trait that you could have. We'll have a minor underscore stress loss for that one. And then we'll put the AI chance under there as well. So AI underscore chance equals base equals 10. We'll have a 10% chance to select this option instead of the one above. And AI underscore value underscore modifier equals AI underscore boldness equals 0.2. And so this is the basic events that we've put out for our activities. We could go through and add a whole bunch more in here. I'm just going to have some blank activities beyond this. So it's going to go with activity test dot 1010 equals curly brackets, and then type equals character event, title equals activity test dot 1010 dot t, and then DESC equals activity test dot 1010 dot DESC, theme equals feast activity. We'll have the option 1 being name equals activity test dot 1010 dot A. And for this tutorial, I'm just going to copy and paste this. The reason being is that this is not a tutorial about events, this is a tutorial about activities. What you could do is go back and look at my video about events to get more inspiration or ideas about how to make these sort of events better. But to make the tutorial a bit shorter, I'm just going to copy paste them and change some of the values. So we still need a few more. We got 1010, we also need 1011, we also need 1012, and then we also need 1013 and 9001. So we'll put that and then change this value again, so 9001. So these are all basic events here. They're all using the same values. It just makes it easier to sort out the localization. One more thing to note with the test underscore events.txt. So we want to change the save with encoding to UTF-8 with bomb, just so that it saves properly and works in in-game. I am going to quickly change these 1010s here to 9001, 9001.t, and 9001.dsc, and 9001.a, because this is an activity that will kind of pop up at similar amounts to the 1010, I want to actually be able to discern whether or not it's a 9000 activity or event. All right, so that is our test underscore events.txt done. We can move on now to our localization. So the first file we're going to create is inside of the activities. So we're going to create a new file here and call it activities underscore test underscore activity underscore L underscore English dot YML. I'm going to start typing by going L underscore English colon, and then below here we're going to go activity test dot 0020 dot T and then colon 0. So this is the title for the event 0020. We're going to have event if host dies, and then the description for that. So activity test dot 0020 dot desc colon 0, and then quotations event description, misspelled there, the description if host dies, and then we'll have the option A for that as well. So activity test dot 0020 dot a colon 0 in quotations option 1, and then below that we're going to make the activity test dot 0021 dot desc colon 0 quotations and then description for event 0021. I believe also we did make it so that our event 0021 also had a different title here. So we're going to put in a new title as well. So activity test.0021.t colon 0. And then that is the title for event 0021. And then below that, we're going to have the activity test.0022.dsc colon 0 quotations description for event 0022, and then the option A for that as well. So activity test.0022.a colon 0 quotations option 1. And then inside of here, we have got the same title as 0021, so we don't need to change that. We also have the 1001 event to add in, so activity test.1001.desc colon 0, and then description for letter event 1001. We don't need to add a title to this as it is already added and through the base game stuff that we've added in here. So opening, we've got the opening here, so we don't need to add a title for that. And then activity test dot 1001 dot a colon 0 equals option 1 for 1001, and then activity test dot 1001 dot b colon 0, and then option 2 for 1001. So all these in quotations here, these are all adjustable values. You can have whatever you like. I'm just using these for examples. Moving on, we've also got 1010 to add in. So activity test.1010.t colon 0, and then it's the weekly event for the host. And then we got to add a description in there as well. So 1010.dst colon 0 description for weekly event. And then the option 1 for that as well. So option 1010.a colon 0, and then option 1 for weekly. And then we also just changed the 9001 here. So we're going to go activity test.9001.t colon 0, and then add the conclusion event. So this is the conclusionary event that will happen at the end of the activity. So activity test.9001.dst colon 0, and then description for the conclusion event, and then the activity test.9001.a colon 0, and then the option 1 for conclusion. With this file as well, you are wanting to make sure that you are also saving with UTF-8 with encoding, or UTF-8 with bomb, sorry, so save encoding UTF-8 with bomb to make sure that it is saving and working in game. The next thing you have to do as well is make a new file inside of inside of event localization. So we're going to create a new file in here and call it activity underscore test underscore L underscore English dot YML. And then inside of here, we're going to go L underscore English again, so colon. And then below here, we're going to have activity test, but change, so activity underscore test colon 1, and then name your activity. So I'm going to have it as activity test. And then the next one we got activity underscore test underscore selection underscore tooltip colon 0, and then the selection tooltip placeholder. I will put some screenshots up on the screen for where these localizations are actually affecting what's in the code or what's in the game. And then below that, we got activity underscore test underscore DESC colon 0. You got description for this activity. And then below that, we've got activity underscore test underscore host underscore DESC colon 0 and host description. So this is the description for the host when he's going to be hosting the activities. And then we've got the activity underscore test underscore guest underscore DESC colon 0, and then the guest description of this activity. And then below that, we've got activity underscore test underscore host underscore n and underscore a colon 0. So this is a weird bit of localization where all you really need to do is host a or host n. So it's based on whatever name that you have for your activity. So if you've got host a hunt, it'll be a, but if you've got something that's host an activity, so it has to be an an. Depending on what the name of your activity is what you would change this to. And then we've also got activity underscore test underscore destination underscore selection colon 0, and then choose a destination placeholder. And we've also got the activity underscore test underscore province underscore description colon 0, what province description, and then the activity underscore test underscore guest underscore help underscore text, and that is choosing a guest tooltip. And then the activity underscore test underscore conclusion underscore DESC colon 0, and that is the conclusion to your activity. And then we got to name our first and second phase that we have made in here. So these names here, first phase equals curly brackets, and then also the second phase, those aren't predetermined names, so we have to actually declare those in our localization. So first underscore phase colon 0, and then we'll just name it first phase, change that up a bit. First phase, and then the first phase underscore DSC colon 0, and then first phase description, and then the second phase name, so colon 0, and then we'll just name it second phase again, and the second underscore phase underscore DSC colon 0, and then the second phase description. All right, there we go. That is the end of the whole coding side of things. All we need to do now is upload and click play. All right, so once we've got the Crusader Kings launcher open, so to upload the mod, what we want to do is go into mod library and then click on upload mod, and then scroll down to the mod that you were just working on. In my case, it's test activity, and then click on Steam Workshop, add a description of at least 10 characters, leave the mod ID open, and then click upload mod. Once your mod has been uploaded, we can now go and look at Steam, Workshop, files you've posted, find the mod that you were just working on, and then subscribe to it. Should pop up in the launcher once it's done downloading. Once it is done downloading, you can add it to the playset and remove the on-file version. So once that's downloaded, you can now go back to the home page and click play. Once we're in the home screen, we can go new game, select any age you like, and then click on any ruler. I'm just going to select the Holy Roman Empire. And then activities, and we've got our activity here. So we've got the test activity, selection tooltip, placeholder. We have the description for the activity, so host description. So because you're the host description will show. This all seems to be working. Click on plan and then go and see our description here is working as well. And we also got to choose a destination placeholder. That's all working perfectly. Then we can select our intentions as well as recreation or murder. So we're going to have recreation as ours, and then you can see we've got guests and such here. And we'll start our test activity and click play. Go into there, and it seems our background is working. Everything seems to be working so far. We've got our letter event now, so description for the letter event, and then option 1 is all working great. In our weekly event, our option 1 is also working. All the localization seems to be going well. got another weekly event. We've got our random event pop-up, insult, and then the conclusion event. And that all seems to be working. Same with the description of the conclusion. All that seems to be working great. All right, so that is the end of this tutorial. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. If you want to see any tutorials in specific, please let me know in the comments. Subscribe if you want to see more tutorials. Like the video if you like the video. Cheers.